Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Genesis Community Livecast. This is our Genesis Shapers recap episode for February 2020 Shapers meeting titled Bug Hunt. I'm David Vogelpohl. I've been a proud member of the Genesis community for a little over 8 years now. I lead Genesis at WP Engine, and I loved helping the Genesis community get better together with my friends from the Shapers. Joining me for this recap episode is Carrie Dills. Carrie, welcome back to the Genesis Community Livecast.
Thanks, David. Always good to be here.
Glad to have you. Normally, we'll have another Shaper join us for these recaps. Remkus de Vries will be joining us next month. He had a schedule conflict, wasn't able to join us this month. So Carrie and I are going to bring us home here with a recap of the Shapers meeting. We'll go ahead and jump on in. And the first question we ask in every Shapers meeting is, can I get a show of hands for those that were able to make it today? Carrie, you were able to make it. Looks like we have, let's see, who else? Mike Hemberger, Bill Erickson, Robin Cornett, Anita Carter. There's Carrie's waving hand. Travis Smith, Remkus de Vries, Ryan Kenstra from the Genesis Custom Blocks team, John Brown of 9 Seeds with a dancing panda and 2 dancing, what is this? Penguins. You know where I got the dancing penguin from? You know why I use that emoji so much, Carrie?
I don't.
It's from a former Shaper, Tanya Mork. Tanya loves the dancing penguins. So.
She loves the dancing. Okay.
I know.
Shout out to Tanya.
Now, internally at WP Engine in our Slack, people rib me because I use the dancing penguin so much. Nawai Baidola, who was on a previous Shapers recap episode. And it looks like we had Sally Getch and Nick Croft. Looks like, and Ryan Murray. Ryan does the disco emoji there.
Yes.
So he's present.
So full house.
Yeah, it was a pretty good show turnout there. So the first question was, will you join me in congratulating Nawai Baidola on his launch of AwesomePress, OSOM-Press. Maybe I'll do a little screen sharing on this one.
Sure.
So people can kind of see what's going on here with Nawai. He actually comes up several times in this episode. But Nawai launched this theme business called a theme and plugin business called AwesomePress. And they've launched a couple of different Genesis child themes. One's called Uprising and the other is Dakota. And both of these themes use one-click theme setup, as well as they include collections, which is the kind of theme demo content all chopped up and available in the editor that's available through Genesis Custom Blocks. I should have installed these themes before we recorded this so I could actually show what they look like on the back end. But Nawai and his team have done a really good job here. For those unfamiliar with Nawai, he is a Genesis and WordPress community organizer based out of Spain. He's also, of course, one of the Genesis Shapers. So we wanted to take a minute there to congratulate him for that. If you check studiopress.blog, there's a blog post on there talking all about AwesomePress and what they launched. Did you congratulate him, Carrie? I'm not seeing your name here, unless you've hearted one of these.
I think I might have hearted Remkus because he said pretty awesome with the OSOM pun. Or if I failed to,
I don't see any congratulations from
congrats, Nawai. That was not meant to be a slight.
Oh, maybe you were multitasking.
I might have been getting my coffee during that first moments of the meeting there.
That is the great thing about Slack meetings being async. You can have little side quests. I know your heart is there, Carrie. I trust.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's actually pretty cool. Now there may be other theme shops, Genesis theme shops out there that are doing this, but Nawai's is the first one I've realized that was using the one-click theme setup that you can do now with Genesis and taking advantage of collections. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the combination of with collections, I think they're the first. There are a few others that have used one-click theme setup. Obviously, that was one of the top requests for the framework. Was, make the demo setup process less annoying. And so we actually had a few folks who were able to implement that in their theme. So that was really good to see. And of course, with Nawai launching AwesomePress kind of from the ground up, he was able to do all the new stuff right away versus having to update old themes. So that was great for him.
Yeah.
Looks like Sally, Nick Croft are congratulating him. I think Ryan Murray is as well. He has the disco thing again. Nawai was appreciative, says thanks. Ryan Kenstra saying congrats.
David Vogelpohl coming through with the
Yes, of
dancing
course.
penguin.
Yes, there you go. John Brown of 9 Seeds giving congrats there to Nawai. And I think that's one of the things I think I love most about the WordPress and Genesis community is just how people that have similar businesses still support each other. I mean, coming from other tech fields where it was more adversarial, I was
Yeah.
like, why are these people being nice to each other? And had to like kind of learn it as I went. But this is so great of John there to put that congrats. Have you participate in other tech communities where it's not as friendly, Carrie, where it's more a little more cutthroat?
Oh, WordPress is pretty much where I stick around.
Okay. Well, just be warned that the
Just be
great wide
warned.
world is not as friendly as we are here in WordPress.
Okay.
All right, on to our next question, which is a little more kind of on point, thinking about generally how we support the Genesis and WordPress community. But this question says, do your non-technical theme customers use local or staging environments when they make changes on their own? Are features like one-click staging on web hosts or software like local helpful for these types or non-technical types of clients? Before we get into the feedback from the other shapers, Carrie, I'll just ask you, I know you do a lot of education with folks through carriedills.com around Genesis and WordPress, I'm guessing maybe even other things, but do you find that like one-click staging or even something like local is helpful for the non-technical user? Or is that still just like too much to fathom? Like they got to go Wild West coding?
I mean, I obviously advocate for using a local environment, but I think for the average bear, I mean, none of my clients ever used it. And I don't know that a non-technical audience is reading my blog, but yeah, I think it's a little, in theory, it's wonderful, but I think it's a little complex for non-technical folk.
Yeah, I feel like non-technical users are like the people that need staging more than anybody because they make the most mistakes. And so like at WP Engine, like we have automated backups by sake of example. And I think that probably saves a lot of non-technical users rears when they make a mistake. Of
It
course, we
saved
also,
my rear a few times. I have to
oh yeah,
admit.
well, right, of course. We all make mistakes, right? But I think people do rely on those backup features to recover from that. But it is interesting to think about like, well, we know it's a best practice, and of course, it would help you avoid a lot of headaches if you followed it. So finding paths that help people using Genesis themes, or frankly anyone in WordPress, seems helpful. Bill Erickson says our clients use staging for building, testing, redesigns. And then we saw a few other folks like Bill mention that same thing, but like know why. But when you dig in a little deeper, what you realize is they set them up and train them on that. And so
Mm-hmm.
this kind of self-serve journey to using local or staging seems to be beyond folks. And it felt like Bill and Nawai were also helping them push it to production.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of a tell on those replies. Does that make sense to you, Carrie?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Um, and Sally kind of chimes in with the same thing. Most of her clients don't even touch their websites. It's up to her. So she'll move it over to staging, do the changes, and they'll review it in that environment. And then, but she's actually doing all the technical stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, none of my clients in my agency days would have done this on their own. At least the non-technical clients. Looks like Travis Smith reinforces that. Travis says only my enterprise clients use staging. Um, Ryan Murray talking about how a fair amount of his do it, but again, kind of that hand-holding notion. John Brown says his non-technical customers almost never use local or staging, and if they do, it's only to test out something very major, like a redesign, switching plugins, things like that. This is really interesting. I mean, I think the feedback was pretty consistent across the board there. There were some things flagged around some of the trouble with using staging or local environments relative to like the amount of data on a site and pushing and pulling that back and providing
Sure.
people paths to segment out, media or something similar, to help limit the impact of that. Um, but I think if you're listening or watching this, and you are Wild West coding, or as people might call cowboy or cowgirl coding, right, exactly, basically making changes in production, it's extremely dangerous. And I'm sure you've probably even felt that before. But check with your host, because a lot of hosts will have really easy, like one-click staging options, and really easy ways to push those changes into your live environment. And then if the host does have that, they will also provide support for that. And that's certainly true at WP Engine and Flywheel, and then the other major managed WordPress hosts that I'm familiar with. So like, don't be afraid to ask. Like, it's the right thing to do. I guess that'll be my public service announcement for now. And then local, which you can find at localwp.com, is free. It's a way to have staging on your local computer, which is helpful for all kinds of reasons. But one of the key reasons I like it for that is because if you are on a host without staging, you can actually use that local environment for your staging. And there are non-technical ways to use that as well. So that's my public service announcement. I guess I should also throw in update WordPress and PHP too while I'm at it.
There you go. And
Yeah.
definitely do those things on a staging environment.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Local is actually really helpful for that, because when people are migrating to new versions of PHP, oftentimes cheaper hosts will not have really elegant tools for that. Like at
Mhm.
WP Engine, we have like little things like the PHP version tester, and we can give you a different environment. You change the PHP, but a lot of hosts don't do that. And local does let you select your PHP environment, so you can have your site in local, have it on the latest version of PHP, see if it explodes or not, fix whatever needs to be fixed, and then migrate it to your host when they have that environment ready for you there. So okay, enough public service announcements. On to our next question. For less technical WordPress developers, do you find creating custom blocks with Genesis custom blocks more or less difficult than creating a custom theme with the Genesis framework, and why? And I was actually really surprised at some of the feedback we got here. But Carrie, what do you think? Like, is using the PHP and CSS templates and custom blocks harder than creating a custom theme with the Genesis framework from your view?
I don't know that it's harder, but my response to this one is I think it hasn't been around as long. Therefore, there are fewer resources or tutorials or how-tos or snippets out there for people to leverage. And so it's maybe perceived as harder just because there's not as many things showing people how to do it.
Yeah, that's a good call out with the content. It seems like the theme from the other shapers, I mean, Anita pointed this out. I think Sally pointed it out, and others, was the snippets. And the fact that,
Mm,
there's just like this huge, rich ecosystem of snippets out there for folks to use that they rely on. And that just doesn't exist yet in the custom blocks context. So that's where one of the reasons I really love these shapers meetings, because it's like the thing you didn't think of is off. It can sometimes
mm,
be the response you get. And I think this is one of those areas, particularly around snippets. I mean, we knew about the documentation piece, of course, but at least for me personally, that was an interesting way to think about what makes it difficult for people to build custom blocks. Um, you know, I think custom blocks, and of course with the block editor also evolving over the year, I think there'll be more to come there, but that's an interesting problem that at least wasn't on my radar. So it's good to get that feedback there. And then
mhm.
this one was really interesting. Ryan Murray's like, Genesis Blocks Pro needs to be +1 mobile responsiveness out of the box. So it looks like he was flagging some mobile responsive issues there. But I know the team's looking into that. But they are mobile first designs. I really want to dig in to see the screenshot
Yeah.
that he's seeing. I'm
Well,
like, what are you talking about?
yeah, the question started out about Genesis custom blocks and then kind of morphed into a conversation about Genesis blocks.
Oh, well, you know how that is, Carrie. We can only herd the cats so much. It's like,
That reminds me of a Super Bowl commercial from years ago where I can't remember who the advertiser was, but it was like cowboys on horses, like this
Oh,
nice
it
sporting
was an
scene.
Aperion commercial.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah,
yeah, all the cats.
yeah.
They're hurting the cats.
That was, it's funny you don't remember the name of that company. They actually went out of business. They're from Austin. There was a joke here locally that they were disappearing. But or no, that was a Jillian. Yeah, I think they were supposed to make $1 jillion. My bad.
Oh,
It was not a period. It was a Jillian. But that was part of the bubble verse back in the
mm,
2001. So you didn't remember the name of the company though. Maybe
uh,
if they had a commercial where you remembered the name, they wouldn't have gone out of business.
yeah, they nailed the memorability part on the concept, but just not the actual important piece of
Yeah,
who the company
exactly.
was. Anyhow, I'm getting us off topic. I'm a cat to be herded as well.
Well, you can't pass up a good cat this story. So all right, on to our next question. Very appropriate, of course, for Black History Month here. But do you know any Black-owned businesses in Genesis or WordPress we could include in WP Engine and Flywheel's Black History Month content and social campaigns? Or do you have any clients who run Black-owned businesses that you'd also like to include? Basically, what's happening is there's a employee resource group, or ERG, called Rise in WP Engine, collectively across WP Engine and Flywheel, really to help provide representation and organization for Black individuals and people of color within our company. And what that employee resource group did was they started to compile a list of Black-owned WordPress-based businesses, as well as clients of those businesses, like agencies and things like that, of who operate Black-owned businesses, so that we can blog about it and then promote those businesses as part of Black History Month. As of the time of this recording, we've already published the list of agencies we've compiled, including those contributed by the Shapers here, as well as folks from the Genesis community who contributed them in a thread that I posted in Genesis WP on Facebook, and then some tweets I did as well to help elicit those. And so we have Carrie, you had suggested Allegra. I'm not going to read all the business names because they'll be in those blog posts.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
two women that I knew from the Dallas Fort Worth WordPress community, kind of a way back in the day. Allegra Sinclair, who's a business coach, and then Claire Matthews, who does copywriting, marketing,
oh, you know, a
content.
lot of folks named
So
with the word Claire in their name.
it's kind of this weird requirement to be a friend of mine. Your name has to somehow incorporate Claire. So I'm sorry,
Incorporate the
David.
word Claire.
We can't do this anymore.
Well, that's why we're not close friends, Carrie. I got it. No, it's funny. My agency was called Marketing Click, and it was Q, like a clique of people.
Mm,
And I had a disproportionate number of customers with the letter Q in their company name. It was really bizarre.
interesting.
I think the Qs were attracted to each other. Um, but moving on, we've got Sally recommending some folks, Ryan Murray, Carrie Deals again. Let's
And of
see.
course, our very own Anita Carter.
Yes, absolutely. Anita Carter there. We have some more stuff coming in follow up to that community livecast episode she and Mike Little did. So stay tuned for that. And it looks like we have a few others who submitted names. I grabbed all of these after the meeting. I went back through and grabbed all of them and put them into the form that we're using to populate those blog posts. So thanks to the Shapers for contributing to those. And then thanks to anyone else who saw that thread on Facebook and also contributed names there as well. On to the next question. Which collections, if any, do your customers use the most? And collections are a feature within Genesis blocks, of course. And then what would you like to see from collection, or what would you like to see collections feature next? This one was easy, interesting. Collections is fairly new to the Genesis blocks construct. It's essentially a whole site of block-based demo content, all with the same design. And so there's been different levels of adoption. Remkes DeFrias hasn't used them yet. Nawai Baidola has used them. And a matter of fact, they've built two of their own in their themes in AwesomePress, as we've talked about them. Oh, wait. I think Nawai has a video I can show. He posted it here. I'm going to
Oh,
mute it
sweet.
so it doesn't overtake the audio. let's see here. I want to check the video before I share my screen to make sure I'm going to be giving Nawai good coverage here. Got to get to the right point of the video too. It's like a long video. I'm going to abandon this if I don't get far enough.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's too much to go through. Sorry, Nawai. I should have prepped for this. But in his themes, Uprising and Dakota, they've put collections in, which I thought was pretty cool. Anita says, I showed the collections to a client who is really, really new at WordPress and Genesis, and she loved it. She would like to see more feminine colors in here, though. They are really dark. Feminine based designs are a big part of the Genesis community as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting when we have new things come out like collections. This will be oftentimes one of the first kind of feature requests. I know they look for that when they design things in the theme and blocks team. And things like diverse representation of people in demo images and things like this. But it looked like Anita felt like we needed more there in the feminine designs in the collections. That's a good call out. So it was also good to see Anita kind of showing it to that novice person. I feel like the key feature of blocks is ultimately to make it easier for content creators to create and edit content. Like if every idea you have for your website, every single one is you have to have a developer to help with, that's not super helpful to you. I mean, of course,
No.
extreme customization, you need a developer, but like building out content should not require a developer. What do you think?
Agreed. Yeah, totally agree. So this is a way of kind of empowering a non-technical user to create really beautiful, professionally designed things on their own. So yeah, John Brown mentioned he'd be interested in seeing some information on how to actually create a collection.
Yeah, there is documentation and it's linked in that thread. Do you see the lights flickering, Carrie?
Oh yeah, is that your power?
I
Okay.
know I'm not haunted. We are recording this during the great ice storm of 2020 here in Texas. And I am hanging on by my fingernails to power, and it's flickering because I think the ice is affecting the power line. So we might have to record this episode in two parts if we get cut off here.
Okay.
I'm gonna knock on some wood real quick.
There you
So
go.
there's power. Oh my God. All right. Let's keep moving. Maybe we'll get it
All
all
right.
on
All
tape.
right.
Next question. If you're using Genesis custom blocks, do you find the new design for the block creation process helpful or disruptive to your block creation workflows? So for those following along, in February 2020, there was a major update to the UI in Genesis custom blocks. It didn't really change the functionality of the way it worked on the back end, but just a nice, cleaner UI, more in line with the design system of WordPress admin in general, WP admin in general. And so I think the feedback here, Nawai liked it, Ryan liked it, thought it was nice. And that was pretty much it. I mean, it's sort
Yeah.
of hard not to like it. It was a good design, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a bit of a softball question, but the product team wanted to see what folks' feedback was after that launch. Next up, this one was meaty. Nita brought this up in a DM to me. Are you seeing any Genesis sites or otherwise that are having ads blocked unexpectedly after recent Firefox updates? And this really gets down to the root of ad blocking and the way browsers and ad blockers affect sites. Now, of course, this doesn't sound like a Genesis thing. It's like a web thing, but the reason we added it here to the shapers is because Anita Carter had noticed many sites being affected by the Firefox update. And Bill Erickson, separate from Firefox, through work he does, but with publishers using ad networks like AdThrive, had actually seen massive effects to the revenue that their sites were able to generate. The purpose of the question was to try to understand how widespread this was. And it looks like Anita and Bill were the only ones really experiencing a problem with it. But I think this has more to do with where they focus their time versus it not being a widespread problem for publishers in general.
Agree. Yeah.
What do you see there, Carrie?
I haven't experienced it, but you're right. I think the sites that they're doing are more likely to see effects from that Firefox doing the ad blocking.
Yeah,
um,
it's in Bill talks about what one of the ad networks he works with and what they're doing. And I'm going to actually have him on my podcast, Press This. Um, and that'll be happening. I think it's happening in February or March. Um, but we're going to go into detail with Bill on this. What he describes, though, is what this ad network or what these ad networks are actually doing. And he says these ad networks are scrambling to collect email addresses so they can associate first party cookies on site A with site B. So
mm,
if you're running a publishing site, I'm going to go into detail with Bill on this on that podcast, but generally one of the key issues that's happening with browsers is not supporting third-party cookies. Now, ad networks rely on third-party cookies to track visitors as they move around sites. Now, of course, this is scary, and the ad networks and everybody else needs to oblige by all the privacy laws. But at the end of the day, what the ad networks are trying to do is show a relevant ad for the user. And so what you can do with the right disclosures and the right, opt-in is essentially collect the visitor's email address, and then through the email address, be able to associate their interests with the ads you would ultimately show them.
mm,
Now, obviously, you have to be very careful with how you go about this to stay in line with the laws of your, where you do business and all those kind of other kinds of things. I'm not going to talk about the legal side because Bill's not a lawyer, but we will talk about the tech side on that podcast. I'll be posting about it on my Twitter when it's published. If you want to follow me, you can get notified that way at WP David V. And then you can just Google Press This if you want to check it out there.
cool.
Sorry, I don't have the date handy. But this is a big deal. And, it's the balance of the web, right? The balance between people's expectations and rights to privacy, and then the balance of essentially publishers providing free content and needing to monetize with ads. And who was it here? Was it Travis Smith or Nick or somebody um, really talking about people moving into not using ad networks and trying to get those ad relationships directly with the advertiser. So that
Mm,
way your ad doesn't require on embed codes with tracking scripts that can get picked up by blockers. I think that's great, but I just don't know how an individual publisher that doesn't have a larger company with salespeople and ad managers can even facilitate this. I mean, I figure you're just dropping in the embed code and optimizing your ad networks and revenue kind of automatically and just inheriting all that from the ad network. Have you ever dealt with a site that had kind of standalone ad units that weren't part of an ad network, Carrie? It's okay if you haven't.
mm-mm.
I'm just curious.
No, I haven't. I've actually only done a handful of sites that used ad network, so it's not something I have a lot of experience with.
Experience in, yeah, my agency days, and we had to deal with ad blockers less back then than folks have to do today. But the good thing about the individual advertisers like buying an ad unit directly from you is you make more money.
Mm,
You can also tailor it really well. It also works really well with like advertorials or like sponsored posts, basically.
okay.
It's another way to get really quality advertising in front of your audience. And if you collect the money directly, you can make a lot per purchase as a publisher. But the downside is it's a lot of operational drag, right? And you have to go
Mm,
find these customers and close them and get them to renew. And so I think the ad network conundrum, staying in line with what browsers are doing, staying in line with what GDPR is doing, and other legislation and other jurisdictions. It's a challenge, but I also think there's an opportunity there to find a nice middle path. I just don't think that there's an elegant way to answer these questions right now. And so I don't think personally that Genesis is the context in which to solve that. I think there's other contexts to solve this at large, but it is
agreed.
helpful for us to understand the pressures that site creators are going through to find growth and success in their businesses. So it was
Yep,
helpful to ask this question to the shapers.
makes sense.
All right. Well, that was it. That was the last question on the agenda. And then the cats kept talking for like another 20 comments here. So we always say like we're officially winding it down, but if you want to keep talking, talk amongst yourselves. And they did. But we won't go all into that. It looks like more details on some of the ad inventory stuff. But I'll tweet out about that article with Bill. So if you are interested in learning more, check that out. I think Bill's also blogged about this a little bit on BillErickson.net. Carrie, thank you
Awesome.
so much for running through the recap with me today.
You betcha. Sorry you got stuck with just me, but hopefully Remkus can join us next month, and your lights will not be flickering by then.
I liked it. Kind of had like the haunted house effect. So that's okay. And I'll live with only having you this time. It is a bit much, but I think I'll be okay.
Good deal.
Thank you so much, Carrie. If you'd like to learn more about what Carrie's up to, visit carriedills.com. Thanks everyone for listening, and stay tuned for future episodes of the Genesis Community Livecast. Again, this has been your host, David Vogelpohl. I've been a proud member of the Genesis community for a little over 8 years now. I lead Genesis at WP Engine, and I love helping the Genesis community get better together with my friends from the Shaper.